The Last of Us Season 2 Episode 7 is a difficult episode to talk about. If you've been following all my videos, you'll know I grew up playing the first game and that I made largely positive reviews about Season 1, but that I never played the second game. I avoided all spoilers for years with the plan to one day play it, only I never quite found the time. I didn't even know Joel was going to die to begin with, and I say that because of how difficult this episode was to predict from my point of view. Again, I've been largely positive about Season 2, and I have been able to see roughly the trajectory of where this story was heading, to pick out the themes. I think my predictions haven't always been entirely accurate in the specifics, but that I've got the broad strokes of where this was going. Or so I thought. This episode flipped a lot of things on its head, and I'm not just talking about Abby there. In fact, Abby's the lesser point. There's a lot that surprised me, and it almost was a pleasant surprise. In theory, I think we've almost got an incredibly strong end to a season here, but it feels like it kills all of its own potential in really odd ways. I so wanted to love this episode. I was loving this episode at first, but there are issues we need to discuss. Let's do that now. So some of you may remember I said I was worried going into this finale, that one episode doesn't feel a long enough time left to conclude everything we need to conclude this season, and also that there might not be enough space for Ellie to totally lose herself, to up her darkness and rage another level. Her arc has seen her largely on a downwards trajectory of having possible support around her, having other focuses that should be her priority in life and could help her to heal, and yet consistently getting pulled further and further down a dark path of hunting Abby, along which she might lose everything. Episode 5 did a difficult but mostly successful task of moving Ellie from this point to this point, but then it cut before we could really sit with the brutality, and then killed a lot of the momentum with a very sweet and moving flashback episode. That did move me a lot, but also didn't feel like it linked well enough to the structure, and now in the finale we return again to Ellie coming back from, to be fair, pretty savage, beating Nora within an inch of her life and then leaving her to turn into one of these wall infected. That's quite a haunting ending there. I love this scene with Dina because it feels so real to me. It's not your typical comic book version of someone slipping into darkness. It's not a one-dimensional, just quietly seething with a singular emotion and Dina being disturbed by it. No, Ellie is genuinely conflicted here and traumatized by what she herself has done. Her deathly whisper and hollow look, for one, reminds me of Joel during Salt Lake. She is shocked at what she herself is capable of doing in her most desperate moments, and Dina argues that maybe Nora deserved it because Dina didn't have to see it. And Dina doesn't know the context either. This is kind of the trick in a way. It's so easy to simplify and justify revenge when you're thinking only from your perspective. But when Ellie reveals to her why Abby's crew killed Joel and what Joel did, now she wants to go home. Which is also very important, by the way. Dina isn't just passively forced to go home because of her leg wound, or even to an extent the baby. The baby is a good motivation, but it's also important that Dina actively doesn't want to pursue this now. This feels like a rounded arc for Dina, going from a very young, naive view of seeking justice, treating it all half like a romantic adventure, and yet slowly the reality has come crashing down. First with the recognition she's pregnant, second with a leg wound, and third with the reveal of what this quest really is. And Ellie, I think we see her grappling with the realization that she understands Joel, realizing she would have done exactly the same thing he did at Salt Lake. I think that brings the sting of her grief back into focus, and I think the guilt too. She wants Abby dead, regardless of what Joel did, but do all these other people need to die? The collateral damage? I would imagine this point doesn't work as well in a game, because in a game you need a lot of action, you probably kill hundreds of people while playing as Ellie at this point. In the same way Joel didn't kill a tenth of the people in Season 1 that he does in Game 1. That's just not realistic outside of the medium of a game. It wouldn't work the same in television, and I think the conflict here with her guilt hits hard as a result. However, crucially, this is a conflict. Do these tears, does this horror and guilt and self-realization make her want to abandon her revenge quest? No. On some warped level, it maybe makes it even matter more, because if there's any side of Ellie feeling bad for what she did to Nora while her emotions were at the most extreme, then she has to make those last words mean something. Wail and wheel. It has to amount to something, otherwise there was no justification at all for what she did to Nora. What's the point I'm building to? Well, the test line from season 1 stuck in my head for all of that season.
Say who you can say.
This season, it's been Gale's line of,
Some people just can't be saved.
And whether or not that idea is true in relation to Ellie. And as a result, I thought the end point of this conflict was Ellie, in some way, sort of shrugging off all of these people wanting to bring her home and then going out singularly after Abby. I thought the end point was some tragic conclusion where the revenge quest has completely consumed her now. Revenge feels inevitable and unavoidable, no matter the consequences. That would be a tragic yet fulfilling end point to her arc this season. But interestingly, that's not what happens. It's kind of the reverse, that Ellie reaches the point where she does choose to go home. She realizes the collateral damage is too much, she can't find Abby anyway, she's a little horrified with what she's done, she needs to learn to let go and heal and put a baby first. Only at the last moment, tragedy intervenes. The consequences of that collateral damage catch up with her in the form of Abby shooting Jesse, holding Tommy at gunpoint, and I would assume Ellie doesn't die here. But this now feels like a climactic moment that will finally push her down that darker, irreversible path at a point where she would otherwise have turned back. It's a cliffhanger ending, and I tend not to like them, but they can still work very well, as long as the character arcs still get to reach the end of a cycle. And that's mostly true here. This cliffhanger feels like a knife edge, but for where their new arc is going to lead. I think it does technically work. Don't get me wrong, I would have preferred to see the outcome of this cliffhanger, and I think that would frustrate a lot of the audience a lot less than the ending we get here. But I think this cliffhanger could technically work regardless, and wouldn't cause half as much frustration had the rest of it been structured more effectively. We might not know the literal outcome of this moment, whether Tommy or Dina die, or if someone gets injured or whatever, but we can sense from the arcs that Abby will get away, and Ellie will want to go after her with a renewed fury now, only this time nobody is going to support her in that. It's taken me this long in that sense to realise that this season wasn't about Ellie losing herself to revenge. It was about Ellie finding herself, finding her new purpose and life beyond just being a cure, or being Joel's daughter, or an agent of revenge. It was about Ellie being saved until tragedy prevents that at the last moment, and then her arc is going to be about revenge. And I don't think that's a bad idea. I quite like it. I think Ellie deciding to go home could have felt really satisfying, and then that Abby's sudden appearance would have felt doubly tragic as a result. However, there are issues, and to talk about them, I should first mention Abby.
I don't see an easy way north, but if he got there, it means we can too. Ellie.
World Anvil. Oh, you better believe it's World Anvil. They are sponsoring this video, they are offering you 51% off, and they are an online tool for building worlds, you may have guessed. But also creating characters, designing and managing campaigns for all sorts of different games. My best friend uses it for D&D, but there's lots of other games. You can use it for planning your stories, writing your stories, working on all sorts of creative projects. For me, it is my novel. I need a tool like this, otherwise I am far too chaotic. We're moving flat soon, and I literally have 6 cardboard boxes full of random sheets of A4 paper I've written old ideas on. Pre-World Anviled me was a nightmare. So with something like this, not only can I keep everything organised, keep it all in one place, be able to easily edit things, but I can create timelines, I can create hyperlinks branching off specific characters or articles or a billion other things that just make it so much easier to find stuff. Planning things can be hard, especially when there's so much to do, but having all of these tools to help visualize it, to help split everything down into specific points, articles one at a time, it helps immensely. I'm not going to show you because it's a secret, but I've created different bio pages for all of the characters in my world, even the minor ones, which house they live in, what their job is, who they're friends with, who they hate, what different beliefs they have or opinions about events that go on in the book, or whatever. So, World Anvil is great. I hope you can hear my passion, and if you desire, if you crave. If you call to the heavens for a 51% discount, then use the code TREE, or click the link in the description, or the pinned comment, or if you just want to try out the free version, then go for that. You know, there's no time limit on it. Test it out for as long as you want. World Anvil. So I think this midpoint would be more effective in the middle of a game rather than as a conclusion to a season where we have to then wait 1 or 2 years to see what happens. I think that's true, and I think the roadmap is clear as well. Season 3 is going to go back in time, see events from Abby's point of view, and then come back to this climax, see what happened here, and then see where the story leads beyond that. I'm a little concerned it might take all of season 3 before we get back to this point, and then we have to wait another season to see what happens. That would probably frustrate me, but I do respect the boldness here. Inevitably, this kind of decision will turn a lot of the audience off who are frustrated at having to wait to see the outcome and who don't really care about Abby's perspective. But I do have a huge respect for a project where the creators go, who cares, this idea won't be universally popular, it's an idea that works, it's meaningful, let's do it anyway. I think in a media climate so obsessed with people playing it safe and producing films like Red One or live action Lilo and Stitch or whatever else, stuff that just recycles the same ideas, the decision to do something that doesn't pander to an audience, I think deserves respect whether or not you like it. And I do generally enjoy stories that challenge me, and season 3 now feels like a very deliberate challenge to the audience of, can you learn to empathise with Abby? For some people that will probably be yes, for others no, and I half wonder if that question itself becomes the overall tension of the story rather than what happens to the characters themselves. I don't know how effective that idea will be, but it's certainly a very interesting one. For those of you who know the game, please do not spoil for me whether I'm correct or not. I don't want to know. But I am glad they decided to hint where season 3 is going before we get there. But that's season 3 anyway. We're supposed to be talking about now and the problems here. I haven't mentioned any of the problems yet. Let's do that. Firstly, no, they haven't successfully managed to fit all of this into a single episode. There just isn't enough time for this central conflict within Ellie. We got a great first moment here, then they set out to get Tommy, Ellie talks with Jesse, and there's a nice sub-conflict between them this episode of fighting for the community as a whole, or fighting for the people you love. There's sort of a love triangle that I'm glad they don't play up too much, which culminates in a somewhat hypocritical move of Ellie to decide Tommy doesn't need saving because she knows where Abby is instead. That's a nice twist halfway through the episode. Ellie is given a choice, and despite everything, she still chooses Abby. Then the tension ramps up towards that encounter, a storm builds. We have a random moment with the Seraphites that hinders a lot of that tension. I think they definitely should have cut this scene. But we're seeking out Abby, and there's a lot of tension about coming towards Abby, and yet Abby isn't there. There's hints she's gone somewhere else, but where is that? Ellie tries to find out, but accidentally kills them both, learns nothing, is horrified by the recognition of pregnancy here. She has to give it up. And up to this point, apart from the unnecessary Seraphite scene, I think I'm mostly happy with the episode. However, honestly, I think this should have been the end point for this episode, and then have an episode 8 after it. I think that would make sense, and then have an episode 8 where this rushed conversation we get between Ellie and Jesse has more room to breathe. We get more time with Tommy as the three of them journey back to Dina with various obstacles along the way. Maybe we even begin that episode with a little prologue scene of Tommy sniping the WLF or whatever he was doing that emphasises the hint much clearer in our minds. Tommy has been killing soldiers. That could be an issue later. Lo and behold, at the end, Abby appears. That's where she's been. That's what she's been doing, hunting down Tommy for killing her crew. As it is, I just don't think there's enough space for this plot twist to hit hard enough. It feels so crammed in at the end of an already hasty wrap-up scene. You know, we got to experience Ellie's feelings here, but we didn't get enough time for her to reflect on them. I want to see her processing this a little bit and reaching the conscious decision for herself to turn back before then everything gets flipped on its head 3/4 of the way into that episode. Not to mention that would give us more time with Tommy, who has felt unconcluded this season. Here he was torn between a very clear need to protect the community and also wanting to look after Ellie like her uncle now that Joel is gone. And then we got told by Jesse that he chose to head out to save Ellie, and then we barely see him at all until the very end, and he doesn't really have space to do anything here. I don't feel he's developed as a character across the season precisely because we never get to see him changing. And I'm sure sure season 3 will remedy all of that. I'm sure we will go back in time and see an arc for Tommy, but a season of a TV show still has to be a well-concluded story within its own right. It can't just leave a giant gap with the promise to fix it in a later season. I don't think that works in the medium of TV. Which is largely what I also said about Gale last video, that there was a lot of build up for this whole Eugene subplot, and we did get to go back in time to learn what happened, but in the present tense, does Gale change? Does she have an arc? No. Do these events with Eugene affect anything going ahead in the story? No. It's all stuff we learned did affect events in the past tense, but all of that culminating in a scene we are shown in episode 1. After that, her arc dies completely, despite her still being a pretty common character with a good amount of screen time. We never see any conclusion to her character. The giant hordes that attacked Jackson should leave a lingering concern, but we forget about that. Isaac, who got a good deal of setup for events, and I assume we'll see more of that in season 3. That's fine for then. I'm sure he is going to be given a well-developed arc, but you should still have something now, even if our perspective on it is different for the moment. Something that develops and does reach a conclusion, even if we then go back in time and see it from a new point of view and it then makes sense in a different way. The idea to go back in time with Abby can still be the overall plan for the story, without needing to abandon all of these elements completely at the end of season 2 in order to very quickly cram in an ending for Ellie. I think if you want people to keep invested and patient and waiting a couple of years for the rest of this story, then this twist here has to hit you like an absolute train. You know, best of all, I think this wouldn't be the ending. I think we would see the outcome of this scene and then the season would end. If you went with my 8-episode idea, there would be space for that to be the case. However, I think there is a decent argument for ending on a cliffhanger. I think just saying, oh, this shouldn't have been a cliffhanger is too simplistic a criticism. Even if it's not my choice, I think the cliffhanger could still work if it was a really effective one that knocks you to the floor. And it doesn't. It's surprising, certainly, but it's not impactful. Think about it. This moment that technically is a very good scene that I should love doesn't fully grip me because of the context of where it is. Because it happens so close to the end of the finale, half my brain is going, okay, this makes sense for Ellie, but also where is Abby? We still need some conclusion to Abby before the season ends, but there's only 5 minutes left, and it left me a little bit confused and unsatisfied as a result. I wasn't fully engaged in the scene. Whereas having this happen at the end of an episode 7, knowing there's still an episode 8, then it makes a ton of sense. Then I'm fully invested, and now the question of where's Abby feels like a tense, lingering question to learn about the next episode. Now we have proper space for Ellie to spend half of that episode coming towards the conclusion of it doesn't matter where Abby is. It matters instead where Dina and the baby and home are. Everything gets to feel well concluded with proper space, regardless of Abby now. Therefore, when she jumps out and says, I'm right here, it kicks you in the gut. At least that's my theory. Not to mention, the episode structure gives me whiplash at the end. We go in the space of several minutes from one big event that changes the course of Ellie's trajectory to now another big event that flips her back again. I feel like we need steps in between the two there. I just think they really shot themselves in the foot with only 7 episodes. I don't know if that's HBO executives we should blame. They certainly damaged House of the Dragon Season 2 by forcing that into less episodes than the creators had planned. When an ending as huge as this doesn't hit, I think it will then leave a lot of people feeling pretty disappointed with the season overall, and that's a huge shame because I loved most of this. I even love the idea here, just the lack of space completely hinders its execution. 6 out of 10 episode, I think 7 out of 10 season overall. I'll obviously still watch season 3, but I don't know if I'm going to make videos on that one. It's probably not a coincidence my season 1 videos all did pretty well for views, and that season 2 was doing fairly well until Joel died, after which all my videos dropped off, and I think that's probably because the audience for the show also dropped off. Inevitably it's going to drop off again before season 3, and as a result I have to be a bit pragmatic about what videos I make because I need to pay the bills with them, so who knows. Maybe I'll be a bigger channel by then, maybe it won't matter, maybe I'll discuss it on Patreon, but until then I've got plans for lots of other videos you might be interested in, other topics, but also one more Last of Us video which is going to be out soon. It's going to be about Gale from the perspective of a therapist, stay tuned for that, and like the video if you liked it. Subscribe, maybe even support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Kellyanne Davidson, Luke Orr, Michael Gallagher, Benry, Joshua C. Follier, and Chad Bramwell. Thank you.